Welcome back to Your Story Medicine. I am your host, Ju McKay, and today I am with the amazing, sensual, and incredible Phuong-Thao Nguyen. Phuong-Thao is a trauma resolution guide, embodiment coach, and boundaries expert who works with women of color and first and generation immigrant women who have been disconnected to themselves from personal and systemic trauma to reconnect back to their worthiness, bodies, and aliveness while reclaiming their nose, their sacred boundaries, and claiming healthy aggression as a superpower through a mind body approach so that they can live an uncaged life. Hi, Feng Tao, Miss
I
Uncaged.
do.
So let's bring it back to I just plug Feng Tao and I got to play together in my program Roots to Rise, where it was just so beautiful to witness you embody more of what it means to be uncaged. And we open up all of our conversations with roses, with celebrations. So what do you get to celebrate about yourself today?
I'm basking in pleasure the way that I'm intentional about it. When I'm feeling sad, I let myself cuddle with sadness. And that makes space for me to just be more embodied with pleasure with people and with myself. And I feel like I'm radiating. And I don't know. But that's how I feel, like pleasure and just radiating from the inside out. I just feel so alive, even in the pandemic.
Yeah. Uh, I also thought it was so cool that you and I got to be students together in Ann Nguyen's program. So I just thought it's for me, it's so beautiful when we can be in spaces where we're continuously learning alongside one another. And so while you were in Roots to Rise, doing more storytelling and business, I was all like, I need help in the pleasure arena. And so we were both being able to receive that medicine. And it's just been so amazing to just see you encompass all of these into your medicine today. So if we can
Ew.
take away the titles, strip away all of these titles, how is it that you would describe your medicine?
Ooh, supporting like women to move from this place of survival to thriving where they embody this deep self-trust and acceptance and compassion, where they're the most connected to themselves, where they know the language of who they are, what their needs, their desires, their preferences, and like their bodies, and reclaiming their voice and like this aliveness and space for rest, joy, and pleasure. And that's where living life happens, where they know who they are and they're so rooted in themselves.
Hmm. Yeah, a theme that has come up for me, as well as I find many other Asian American women, is the challenge that we have when it comes to unapologetically putting our pleasure out there because of the ways that we equate it to be in our minds. Like there's this fear that we're going to be fetishized, or that we're um, going to be seen as easy, and all of these other stories. And I'm curious about your ancestral lineage and how this has influenced your medicine and the way that you're showing up today.
Yes, I my roots are connected to Vietnam. That's where I was born. That's where many of my generations are from. And when I immigrated over here, I got to see both how American life was, but most importantly, first it was being Vietnamese. and witnessing the women in my family, from my mother to my aunts and other Vietnamese women in the immigrant community, and how they had blocked themselves from their own pleasures, their own happiness. It was always prioritized around other men. And because I saw that was the norm, I did the same, where I didn't put myself in the equation of pleasure. I had equated pleasure with only men, where men got to receive pleasure. And I was the one responsible for giving pleasure by giving up my body, by giving up access or power over my body to them. And so oh gosh, I'm lost in thought right now. This is going to be edited out. Okay, good. What was the question again?
What is your ancestral lineage and how is this influencing the way that you're showing up today?
Oh, yes. So growing up in the Vietnamese culture, I learned to dim myself, to silence my voice. I learned that I didn't matter as much in the culture because patriarchy was seeped deep in the Vietnamese culture. And so that was where women, girls, and women's worth was less than boys and men. And I saw how that was embodied in the women in my family, the women in the community. And therefore, that was normal. And that's where I had defined my worth through what I saw. And because I didn't feel as worthy, I didn't feel like my needs, or I wasn't allowed to have needs. I didn't feel like my voice was of any value. And I gave my power away because I couldn't be trusted with my own power. I had to live through others, live for others, and never for myself, because I was told this story of like, if you live for yourself, then you're selfish, you're bad. And I was shamed. And I was a child. I didn't know what to do with the shame. So I internalized that shame. I kept replaying that story. And that blocked me off from fully getting to know Phuong-Thao right here. I was an expert at knowing everyone else. And so I was just so disconnected. And the universe has a beautiful way of helping me repeat the same lessons until I woke the hell up from different people. And that's what led me to, from like the way that I grew up as a Vietnamese girl in the immigrant community, to finally walking on the Uncaged Path. And that was where I was able to free the parts of myself that I had denied and learn to repress, because that's what happens when you're shamed, in order to receive love and to be accepted. And I had to sacrifice myself in order to make relationships work. But I just came to a point where my spirit was slowly dying, and I just reached a point where I couldn't do it anymore. And that was literally 2 years ago. And during that time in my life, for many of you may not know, I was married. And I just moved to France with hopes that my relationship would get better, because I was on this path of happiness based on society's standards. I graduated from college, I got married, a house, now living in this dream place called France. And I should be happy, right? I was following all the steps. And in reality, I was so unhappy. I was so disconnected to myself. I grew resentful because I was on a path created by society for me instead of by me. And so moving to a new country only amplified what I was running away from, which was the truth that my body knew before my mind knew. And it was one night where I couldn't hold it all together by myself anymore. I couldn't pretend that I don't have needs. I couldn't pretend that my voice didn't matter, that I didn't matter as much. And I found myself literally on my knees on the bathroom floor in the middle of the night, uncontrollably crying to the point where I couldn't even say a word. It just like all the tears, all the snot, I just couldn't stop. And until there was a point where I was able to finally catch my breath. Things seemed to slow down around me, and I could hear my body, specifically my gut, saying, "It's time to move on. This marriage is over." While I heard what my body was saying, my body also reacted with resistance and tightness and heaviness because of my heart still said, "I still love him." While my heart was under the influence of society standards that you can't start over now. You're about to turn 30. You're supposed to be having kids now. You need to suck it up and do whatever you can as a woman to make it work, even if you need to sacrifice yourself. The marriage lasting is what's more important than you. If you leave now, you're going to fail. You're not going to make it alone. You need him. And so I was at war with all those different parts. But fortunately, the year before, I was already beginning to reconnect to my body, listening to my body. And when I heard that voice saying that it's time, the marriage is over, I listened. And it took about 9 months for my heart, for my mind to align with my gut. And I filed for divorce. And so this led me to the work that I'm doing today of learning to connect to your body, hearing what your body is telling you, because oftentimes your body knows before your mind knows. And how do you work with the body when your heart is telling you something else and your mind is under the spell of whatever society conditioned you to think and believe? And when you're free of all those different parts, when you work through the trauma, that's where you get free. That's what happens when you're on the uncaged path, where you really get to know this person that's been on this journey with you the longest. And how can you come back to you? And so that's what I'm doing today, because I know how it's like to live a life that was not created by you, that makes you feel small, where you have to silence and dim yourself. And you're not just living, you're just surviving. So it's time to thrive. And that's what I'm doing today.
Ooh, girl. Ooh, wow. Wow. So I'm just imagining myself in Paris right now, which is what is perceived to be the most romantic place in the world, and how so many of us have been conditioned by society to go and find our knight in shining armor. I know, especially growing up with an immigrant Asian mother, the epitome of the American dream would be to find a white partner. And I have only dated men of color my whole life. And it was just so interesting how I would see other people in the community who it would be the talk of the town, like, oh, so and so got a white guy. And I mean, I'm making assumptions of what your partner was, but I can only imagine how even you being in this European country, to your family and maybe even to your friends, was a marker of success.
Mhm.
Being in the United States, growing up as American, in spite of coming from a lineage where your family was displaced out of their ancestral homeland. And so, how is it that you dealt with other people's opinions of you when you chose you?
Well, that's where I set boundaries up on this on this big decision that I made, because I knew what my relatives, what my parents would say, because like you shared, my ex-husband is white, and he, checked up all the boxes. He had a great job, he had money, he had a house, he could take care of me. Their daughter was going to be taken care of. So if he's not a bad person, I should be happy. And so I knew that was going to happen. So at that time in my life, I was just like, you know what? I don't even need to tell anyone that's not going to be supportive of my decision from the beginning, and I'm going to choose when to tell them. And so after the divorce finalized, after I was settled and I had more capacity to have those conversations, to the point where I was rooted and really didn't care about what people said, because I was so happy. I was so happy that I finally lived for me, and I got to like marinate in that feeling, where when I finally told my mom 11 months after the divorce finalized, I was in a place of like, you're allowed to think what you want, and that's okay, because I am so happy. And so some relatives disagreed with my decision because they didn't get it. I was financially, like set up for life. And I was living the dream that the immigrant community talks about, that I should be happy if I'm financially stable and more. And yet, surprisingly, my mom was like, yeah, my relationship with my mom has shifted, but she was like, that's okay. You do you. I'm like, Mom, this is not what you would have said 10 years ago. You had a different story. And she was like, I know, but your happiness matters more. Mm-hmm. Because I've been sharing with her over the years of how I've been treated by men, and she changed to the point where she cares about her children's happiness more than the material things, because I had it all. I had it all. But my mom saw how I was suffering. And so yeah, it was a surprise when I shared it with folks, but I came from a place of like, I decided to hold off on telling certain people and just marinate in the joy of that decision. And I was just in a place of like, that's okay, because I'm happy. You're allowed to have your thoughts. And that's where it is.
This is evidence of how us saying yes to ourselves and our legacies is healing generations before and after us. Mm. That fear of, what is my family going to think? What about my mother, after everything it is she's done to make sure that I have a privilege of being able to have choices in my life? And what if the choice that I choose is not what she expected of me, or what my family or what my partner expected of me? And I also find it so symbolic that you experienced this at the peak of your Saturn. Fun fact, everyone, the first domain name I ever bought was survivingsaturn.com, because I thought my business was going to be about supporting people transitioning out of their Saturn return. But I was 29 as well when I started my business. I had no idea what I was doing. And I'm like, who the heck am I to coach people going through their Saturn return when I'm still in mine and figuring out my life? And it's just so funny that so many people who I come across today are going through theirs, but now I can look back and be like, oh yeah, I remember that time of my life. Yeah, because it was on my 30th birthday where my mom, for the very first time, turned to me and said, when you are ready to have children, I will be your doula. And of course, you can go to an earlier episode to hear about that. But whoa, this is coming from somebody who told me to never have children because it only brings suffering.
Oh my gosh.
Wow. Celebrating you so hard for that. I want to dig deeper into boundaries uh, and the shame that many of us experience when we start placing those boundaries. Something that I have been challenged with is discerning what is healthy shame versus toxic shame. I especially see it a lot online right now where there isn't a place for us to actually connect heart to heart in person. And it's so easy to say the wrong thing and get so scared that you're going to be guilted or shamed for um, for messing up. And so, how is it that you would support us in discerning when it is healthy and when it is toxic, or when there is anger that is righteous and when it becomes toxic, without of course policing anybody's emotions, but just for us to be able to assess that for ourselves.
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. Yeah, the power of discernment of yeah, with healthy shame. So the difference between healthy and toxic shame is that healthy shame focuses on the actions of someone and still being met with love and like repair. The toxic shame is focusing on the individual as bad and punishing in a kind of way. So for example, like a few months ago, I'm in like this deep soul sister friendship, and I had said something that caused a rupture in our friendship. And she eventually told me the impact of what I had said about something that she shared vulnerably. And so she focused on what I had said, so like the actions and the impact on her. And she said, and I still care about our friendship. And I want to be able to like move through this together with you. And I was open, and this is like what I'm comfortable in terms of like repair, how it would look like. And so it took at least probably like 2 weeks going back and forth through video or audio messages because that was like what she felt safe in doing. So like repair is possible when a rupture happens under healthy shame, because healthy shame is focusing on the action that had caused harm. And so there's intentions and there's impact. Like my intention of what I was sharing was good, but the impact was what was left, harming her, feeling unsafe. And now, toxic shame, something that is so common with immigrant parents,
Oh
authoritarian parenting, of expecting absolute obedience, and if you don't fall in line, if you don't listen or say yes, if you say no or talk back, there's toxic shame. And so that comes out with focusing on like you as a person rather than what you did. You're bad. um or like often for me I was like, you're a bad girl, or like if I keep, or so there's the bad, or you're like, or the toxic comparison too. So that's where the shame also further along with like, why can't you be like your Vietnamese friend? Why can't you be like your Vietnamese cousin? Why can't you be da da da? So that comparison under the toxic shame, but then it's not, but it's like it doesn't, there's no affection, there's no love, there's no repair at all. It's just, this is it, and you are bad. Or sometimes I just get, or there's a punishment, withholding love, which is very common, even though love is not commonly expressed in a lot of Asian cultures, but attention is withdrawn. I got ignored often, or sometimes the physical discipline, physical abuse, really. And so that's how toxic shame can look like, is like a form of punishment, a form of withholding or withdrawing love, affection, attention, and making you feel like you are bad as a person, like you are wrong for being who you are. Whereas healthy shame focuses on like, oh, well, what you did negatively caused harm and it's repairable, and let's
Mhm.
work through this together. I still love you. I still care about our friendship, our relationship. And I don't know how this is going to work because for most people this is new, but let's figure this out. So there's still the love. There's that
Yeah.
um connection. And so that's the difference between healthy shame and toxic shame.
I love this discernment so much because I feel like in your friendship, it takes a certain level of emotional resilience and emotional intelligence to be able to ask for your needs. And I feel like if that trust was not initially there, it would be so easy to resort to toxic shame or just not discussing it at all. And I feel like I'm having this light bulb moment now where I can just see people's inner children showing up whenever they are immersed in toxic shame, especially in communities of color. The ways that we go at it with each other, I'm like, oh, now I can connect it to what is it how is it that your parents shamed you growing up? And how is this pattern being repeated in your relationships, not even just with relationships, but even with the total strangers, because again, I see so much of this online in the ways that we try to correct people, or like the call out culture. And like, why does this happen so much in communities of color?
It's the unresolved trauma. It's the
Yeah.
unresolved traumas. And it's like if we still hold on to those old stories or those experiences that we haven't processed or moved through, it
Yeah.
just continues on with us. And until
Yeah.
we work through that, until we surround ourselves with people who have done the work and show us there's another way where we can be in community and work through this conflict together.
Mm. Where is it that I find more friendships like that?
Right here, right
I know, right?
in your program.
I know, and I mean, it's sad, and it's also something that I'm so grateful for.
Mhm.
I had to, we have to, or we choose to create the very spaces it is that we wish existed. And it's turned into our business, not because it's something that we want to make a shit ton of money off of, but it's because we know that in order to do this deep transformational work, it's going to require a level of commitment. It's going to require you to say no to other things you would typically say yes to that would take you away from showing up and investing not just money, but time and your emotions into this process, where we're no longer creating a space where we get to allow you to share these old stories on repeat and be in circles where we're just like giving you a pat on the back or just like only focusing on the positive. Like, let's go there. This is surgery right here that you're not going to get at a hospital. So, I want to hear more about what has I mean, of course, without sharing the details of what happens inside of your program, but what are some of the common themes you've been experiencing as you've created this beautiful container of uncaged boundaries for women of color? Like, share with us more about the magic that you've created.
Ooh, so in this community, the common themes is the difficulty of saying no to the people that are closest to us. So, number one, family. If you have romantic partners or even friends, because even though each woman, different age, different socioeconomic status, different ethnicities, they have the shared experience of growing up where saying yes was the polite thing to do. So when they weren't allowed to do that and they were met with shame for saying no, because you're going to hurt the other person's feelings, you're going to let the other person down. If you say no, that means you don't love or care about the other person. So they remember those stories and the experiences at the body level where it wasn't okay to say that. So their body was like, nope, that's scary. Nope, it wasn't okay. So in the program, the magic happens is like working with not just the mind of flipping the script at the mind level and introducing different narratives that support them today, but also working with their bodies very slowly and like getting to know like, oh, this is how my body responds in this way. So what small doable step can I take to work towards where I want to go? Where can I go that feels safe? So going where it feels safe and doable. And it's the community, the intimate community of less than 7 women of witnessing each other. Because I do this work one-on-one. And one woman told me that even though we had one-on-one sessions, it wasn't until in this group things clicked for her even more through witnessing the stories of the other women, that she was able to witness the other, what she was trying to do, seeing what the other woman was already doing and setting boundaries with her parents. And so that gave her even more permission. So that's why I'm doing like the group work, because I'm not only doing this by myself in a one-on-one container, but in the group program, we're co-creating this. This was originally only 4 months. And because of them, there's a part 2 for another 4 months to do this work even on a deeper level together. And like they named, there's not another program like this. And so that's
Yeah,
what it is right now.
I love how you say co-create, because it's so easy for us to put ourselves on this pedestal of what it means to be an expert, or to
Mhm.
go to one person to then pour into us, versus recognizing that our lived experience is what qualifies us into being able to share our learning lessons of how it is we responded to situations that didn't feel good in our body. And I feel like so much of the work in personal development emphasizes on mindset, but there's not many spaces to process what comes up in the body.
Mhm.
There's that huge disconnect, and uh, shame dies in places where our stories are shared. So, of course, I experienced this over and over again as well, where transformations become tenfold when you're able to be in practice with a community where you can bear witness to each other's stories, where this is not a place where we are shaming one another for messing up, but this is a part of the process.
Absolutely. Yeah, like you mentioned with the body, like using or working with our body, like I invite the women to feel their no. So how does their, what is the boundary physically in their personal space? Because like in their shared experiences, they weren't allowed their own personal space. Everyone was encroaching in their space. So we're feeling out our personal space. We're like, okay, so now I know this physical boundary. What am I going to let in to the space now that I know is mine, and what can I keep out that I don't want in this space? And that's something I also learned from my trauma teacher, Rachel Maddox. And when they know what their no's are, that's the portal to their anger. The portal to their anger, because once they are connected to what they're a no to, and when someone just wants to cross over their personal space, their boundaries, that's when they know that's where the anger is okay to come out, to protect them of, I said no. And like, it's okay to yell. And so we work through the shame of even yelling. And so I guide them through different embodiment practice where we are in a circle of letting our rage out and like smashing things or crumbling up things and yelling. I have like an anger playlist, and we just let it out, because so many of the women never had the time and space to even, because the anger was so scary. It was, and this is something else that I've not only experienced, but seen with women is there's like this binary of like repress your anger, or there's that toxic anger of like when my parents were angry, they hurt me. And so I don't want to be connected to the anger. So because that was the only anger that they saw modeled, it was safer to just repress the anger. So here in the program, I helped them to find another way, that there's the healthy aggression of like, there are times where the anger needs to come out to protect you. Like, think of Mama Bear. Does she think about what other people will think? No, she's doing it to protect her cubs. So the anger, I help them to reassociate, to be in relationship of the anger is there to protect you when someone is violating or threatening you.
Mm, yeah, that's total green Tara vibes. Another business name I chose, by the way, Green Tara Guidance. She just sits on my altar now, but it's I've talked about her before. But are you familiar with Green Tara? She's
Yeah.
the green Buddhist deity, one of the few women of the Buddhist lineage who, when you see an image of her, it looks like she's gently stepping off of this lotus, but she's actually stomping and saying it stops here.
Mhm.
She's stepping off of the lotus to let you know that this is a boundary to not cross.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Uh I want to celebrate you for creating this space. I'm just like, this sounds so epic. How do I like I feel like all of us like imagine if this was actually a part of our education growing up. We're so focused on the intellect and reading these books and just like getting good grades and getting the approval from our teachers and from our parents, and we are not taught these skills of how to relate to other human beings at this level.
Yeah.
And so how is it that you are currently staying grounded, especially when you find others are being activated in this work? Do you still find yourself activated? And what is it that you have had to learn to release in this process, especially as a leader?
Yes, ground. I do that. It's part of my daily practice and throughout the day, and that deep connection to my body. I check in with my, it's like autopilot now. I'm like, hey body, what's going on? And like also like in between sessions, like I go outside to reset. I go for a walk, even for 10 minutes before I hop on my next session with the client. And like really having this connection back to nature, back to Mother Earth has been such a grounding practice for me because it helps remind me that I don't need to hold it. I don't need to carry it all. I can just allow it to flow. And like I'm being held and supported in that way. So like yeah, not only being in relationship with my body, but also with nature and Mother Earth, and knowing that I don't have to hold it all, and being community has been really grounding of like there are days where I fall apart and I just need someone to just hear me, to witness me, not to say anything. And like that's also been really grounding for me because again, like we're not meant to hold it all by ourselves. So it's like the community and nature and the daily practices of like checking in and see what I need to do, and yeah, holding space for the different things that come up of like when I hold space for sometimes the uncomfortable feelings of I've been really intimate with sadness. I've been like really getting to know that part of me where I'm like, all right, sadness, I'm cuddling up with you on the couch now. And like just holding space for like sometimes an hour. And I'm like, whew, okay, that moved through. And like now I have space for other things. And so I have more capacity because I learned before when I don't hold space for certain emotions and I just repress it, it takes up space and I can't connect to joy or pleasure or like even allow myself to rest because it's consuming so much energy. And so when I just like, okay, I see and hear you. What do you need? And when I make space for that, I just have so much capacity for life.
Yeah, it's so easy to make the assumption that because you are in your joy and in your pleasure that you don't experience those things. And I love your stories because you walk us through that journey, but it doesn't feel performative. It's like, hey, I am embodying what it looks like for me to be okay with my sadness. And what is it that I'm going to do for sadness today? I'm going to cook a Vietnamese meal. And by the way, I didn't grow up learning how to make any of this stuff. So this is also my means of reclamation and remothering myself. So I just need to say that I see the stories that you're putting out there and the ways that you are doing your best, and you are doing an incredible job at embodying this transformation. And because when you embody it, you invite others to be able to do the same. I remember being so inspired watching your stories. I'm like, I'm going to learn how to make this stir fry noodle recipe, because if Phuong-Thao can learn how to cook her ancestors' medicine in her 30s, then so can I.
It's not too late
It's
to
not too late.
claim our lineage, and that's part of the decolonial journey, because as immigrants we're forced to assimilate, so that's part of our journeys of reconnecting to our ancestors.
Yes, I love that. So, um, what is a ritual or practice you can invite people to embody in their own lives so that they can start reclaiming their sacred boundaries today?
I check in, what is my honoring my capacity. So what is my capacity today? What can I do? What can I actually do today? And so that's like a ritual I invite people, is to check in, what is their capacity? And that might be foreign at first, but once you really tune into what your capacity is that day and you make informed decisions from that place, you begin to, again, like there's a certain, again, you create portals, more access to things. Like if you just forced yourself through that, you overrided your own capacity, you're no longer draining yourself. You're no longer giving your time and energy freely away. You're like, actually, only have capacity to do these few things or this one thing today because I need to deal with what life just threw at me today.
Mhm.
So, yeah, honor your capacity. Checking in. What is my
Mhm.
capacity today?
Mhm. Wow, if only your younger self could see you today and who you have evolved into. So, uh, with that being said, if you could speak to yourself at that time in your life where you were in Paris, just on the floor in a puddle of tears, wondering, what the heck am I doing? Where do I go from here? If you could speak to that version of yourself as a future ancestor, what would you say?
Trust in the wisdom of your body. It's okay if it doesn't make sense at the mind, but the body knows before your mind knows.
Yeah.
Trust what it's telling you.
Trust in the wisdom of your body. Phuong-Thao, thank you so much for sharing your story medicine today. Where is it that people can go and find you, especially if they want to dig deeper into reclaiming their own boundaries?
Thank you for asking. Yes, so they can find out more about the program on my website at the Uncaged Path. And the next cohort will be starting sometime in June. So that's coming up. Or you can follow me on Instagram, where I share like mini lessons and my stories. So my Instagram handle is the Uncaged Path as well. And you can sign up for my newsletter on my website too, to see what I'm up to, what I'm offering. And like this Thursday, I'll be doing a workshop with the Cosmos on reconnecting to anger, just for Asian women only. So that's just a taste of what I do, and how we can stay connected.
So grateful for you. Thank you so much, Phuong-Thao. And I'm so excited for the elders we are becoming and the ways that we get to uh, set really good intentions of the ways we want to impact the world, knowing that we are going to fuck up along the way, but at least I have people like you in my life to gently call me in and remind me that I am a good person and we just get to improve the situations and the ways that we respond to not further commit harm.
Absolutely. We don't know what we don't know. But when we're given the opportunity to show up, that's where the healing and transformation happens.
Yes, yes, I just love and adore you.
Oh, I'm so grateful that we found each other. Actually, I found you first. So yeah,
Oh my gosh, love fest, love fest, love fest. Y'all, don't you want to join the party? Okay, see you next week.